I'm Peter Kulchinsky, Managing Partner of RA Capital Management. I'm an investor, a scientist, and a food allergy parent. So food allergies are personal for me, as they are for many. And in each episode of this monthly podcast, I'll be speaking with a dynamic thought leader about the grand human quest to conquer food allergies. We'll explore the science of food allergies and technologies to prevent, diagnose, and treat them, as well as the complexities of public policy, insurance, business models, and simply human behavior that, like many entrepreneurs know, can kill seemingly good ideas. So join me and let's talk to the brightest minds on the planet about the food allergy solutions we already have and what's on the horizon. Welcome to Future in Sight. Welcome to another episode of Future in Sight. I'm Peter Kulchinsky, and I'm joined today by Bob Earl, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs with FAIR. And he has had a long career in the food and beverage industry, and we're going to be talking about innovation in that field. Bob, can you tell us a bit about your journey?
Certainly. My training is in human nutrition and public health, and I'm also a registered dietitian by training. Getting very interested in public policy early in my career, and then ended up coming back to Washington, D.C. I'm a Washington, D.C. native, and began my journey that led me up to the food industry with working in the government affairs office of then the American Dietetic Association. Then for the next several years, worked in coalitions leading up toward what today is the nutrition facts panel that we see on all of our food packages. I then departed that job and went over to the Food Nutrition Board at the National Academies at the Institute of Medicine and worked on the study for the FDA and USDA that laid out the scientific foundation for what has become the Nutrition Facts Panel on food packages and codified under the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act. So after working on various studies there, looking at future opportunities in nutrition and food science, iron deficiency anemia, and other types of things, went on to go to the International Food Information Council, which is an industry-supported organization that did mostly communications about food and nutrition topics. And at IFIC, I created its first food allergy and food sensitivities committee. And at that time, back in the late 90s, worked very closely with a predecessor organization of FAIR, the Food Allergy and Anaphylaxis Network, or FAN. And so I've been working on the food allergy issue from inside organizations supported by industry at the food industry. And I've also served on the board of directors of the Food Allergy Research and Resource Program at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. So I do bring, working on other topics like dietary guidelines for Americans and looking at ways to improve information that is delivered to consumers, both in the United States and internationally.
So that's a remarkable number of organizations involved in different aspects of the food industry and labeling. And I imagine some of those were involved in the food pyramid that hangs on our fridge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and labels have gotten more detailed. I presume there's a lot of science that goes into calculating the exact number of calories and grams of each type of carbohydrate. You've seen the evolution of that, but that only takes us up to about 20 years ago. What have you done in the most recent 20 years of your career?
And I worked at the National Food Processors Association that then merged together with another food industry association and took the name of the Grocery Manufacturers Association. There I led the organization's nutrition and health policy work and worked, like you said, the food pyramid that hangs on your refrigerator, worked on getting all of industry associations on one page and food companies to lay forward what would be best for Americans and industry than in our dietary guidelines for Americans. Other things, working internationally on global standards for food labeling and nutrition through basically, for lack of a better term, the Global Food Code, the Codex Alimentarius.
I'm curious. So, just to sort of pause there and go down a rabbit hole with you, when you say you get the different companies and different stakeholders involved in the food pyramid together to try to like hash out some sort of common framework, where do the candy manufacturers stand in this? Like, do they come at this problem claiming that they're addressing a nutritional deficit of some kind, helping people with diabetes titrate their blood sugar? Or does everybody know that it's like, all right, buddy, you're driving the cavities, obesity, all that kind of stuff? And
well, I think candy is, and the main association that represents candy makers in the United States, the National Confectioners Association, they do realize that candy is a treat, and it's not something that you consume exclusively from the time you get up in the morning till the time you go to bed. And that it has its place. Same with caloric beverages. Lots of debate over the years about chocolate milk in school feeding programs, and I think that sometimes you have to weigh the pros and cons of, is it better to have a little bit of sugar, salt, or fat in something to make it more palatable to consumers, to, let's say, drive consumption of milk and getting calcium and other nutrients? Or conversely, can we help increase consumption of fruits and vegetables by putting a well balanced and orchestrated, formulated salad dressing on those vegetables to make it more palatable?
Well, so let me try to ask the kind of naive questions that any well-intentioned observer of nutrition might ask. Why don't we just outlaw excessive sugar? And why are non-diet cola drinks even allowed? I mean, look at the damage they cause, the diabetes, the obesity, the harm, and then it drives up healthcare spending. Wouldn't it just be better if we outlawed the bad stuff? So, this must have been proposed at various times by various stakeholders. How does the discussion go, and why do we continue to have, what seems to be, a rather generous number of calories in our standard diet?
Well, I think you look at what the place is for different foods and beverages, and let's say a caloric soft drink, let's say, might have a place if someone's
what is the place?
burning a lot of calories. They could have that in their calorie bank, so to speak, for a given day. But I think certainly the beverage industry has been very innovative with fostering new types of no-calorie sweeteners that taste great when used in combination, can deliver something that tastes almost like a beverage sweetened with sugar. But let's also remember that when you look at overall patterns of American consumers, the foods and beverages that they consume, we also see that if you lump together like desserts and other types of snacks, ice cream, et cetera, that's probably putting more sugar into the diet than what comes from beverages. Just sure. Beverages as a discrete group gets singled out, but then you've got different categories.
Let's not single out beverages. I guess I kind of see, I'm curious if you see parallels between climate change and the excessive caloric intake, frankly, around the world. The rising obesity levels lead to rising healthcare costs. Well, rising carbon levels, lead to climate change and all kinds of other downstream expenses as a result of that, storms and droughts and fires. And we're trying to get to now net zero, right? So how do we displace fossil fuels and try to get low carbon energy sources? Well, how do we displace the high caloric, gratuitously, caloric foods with things that are healthier? Consumers don't like either. Consumers want, their cheap energy. And so there's government subsidies, for these alternate energies. There's talk of a carbon tax to, try to show what the true cost is of fossil fuels. Do you see the parallels in the food industry, subsidies for healthier foods, taxes on the less healthy foods, to try to shift consumer preferences for our own good?
We actually have seen that not only in the United States, but globally, that there have been efforts to have increased sales tax or production tax on different types of beverages. That's been an experiment. Has it been successful? In my opinion, not very, because we've seen everything from people, going outside of the jurisdiction that has the tax and going and buying the product where it's not taxed, and those types of shifts, that it hasn't been that effective.
Where has it been done? They say that the future's already here. You just have to know where to look.
Right? There have been taxes on caloric beverages in Berkeley, California. Other places, the state of West Virginia has had a long-standing increased sales tax on soft drinks by a couple of pennies. Philadelphia, other jurisdictions have done this. It's been done in other countries around the world as well. But like with our bodies and the food we consume, we have to balance that with our level of physical activity. And I think that it's very true that people live way too sedentary lifestyles and don't get enough physical activity and movement during the day to burn energy to be able to have a better bank of calories, and hopefully getting that from nutrient dense foods as part of their diet.
I think the food and beverage industry probably is not going to make people more active. I think we have to ask, if people remain as inactive as they are, what can the food and beverage industry do, or what should we as a society, shape it to be in order to, try to address, population health issues or social health. But that does fly in the face of individual liberties. Somebody's like, I want to be sedentary and I want to, drink, regular Coke. And I'm curious, the people that are within these companies, and you've worked at Coke, you've worked in the industry, you've gotten to know them as people. What kinds of people do you find developing these products? Do they, do they tend to be run by sort of the individual liberty folks that are like, yeah, I'm just going to let people choose what they want, and if it means that they're, driving themselves into terrible health, that's their choice? Or do they feel accountable and they want to shape the food somehow?
I would say that they feel accountable, and that's where innovation. I mean, up until the 1960s, we didn't really have any substitutes for sugar in beverages. And so the research that's been done in creating a portfolio of low and no calorie sweeteners has been tremendous over the last several decades, and it continues. Industry is still looking for a holy grail that mimics the mouthfeel, the taste of sucrose and table sugar, or that would be used, or cane sugar that would be used in a product, or then are trying to find something that even does a better job of delivering an equivalent taste, but with 0 calories or very, very few calories.
What is it that drives companies like Coke and Pepsi to try to innovate in that direction? Is it government, policies, or is it the, shifting preferences of consumers? Like their own customers are preferring lower calorie drinks, and so the beverage companies are accommodating.
I think it's mostly the latter, but there is push and pull from government in things like federal nutrition policy and the dietary guidelines for Americans, or the most recent revision to the nutrition facts panel in the United States to require the inclusion of added sugars on the label so that consumers know, and to set values that one should strive to not exceed in their overall dietary patterns over the course of a day, week, month.
Right. So now we see some labels saying no added sugar, and that's like bragging rights code for we're healthier than those that do have added sugars.
Certainly can be. I mean, there's been, not just related to caloric consumption, but we've seen a huge growth in negative or absence claims on food packages, whether it be no added sugar, 0 calories, gluten-free, no GMOs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We see this all the time. And, sometimes you look at something that has about eight claims on it, and it's still a cookie. And you wonder what kind of, it does create health halos. And that's in the framework of regulations, as long as you're in the United States, those are allowed to be made. Certainly some, like gluten-free, has standards that you can't exceed a certain level of gluten in a product, but other things, by eliminating sugar, it could, something could still be sugar-free, but have calories. And there also are things that you have to say, not a calorie-free food or something like that, with different types of claims.
So it sounds like on the policy side, government is pushing transparency, right? And somehow consumers, maybe driven through the work of nonprofits or other organizations, are becoming more aware of, wanting to consume less sugar or, other ingredients. And so now they're finding that the labels are giving them the information they need in order to make, certain choices, right? What is shaping consumer preference? Are there organizations behind the scenes that are saying, let's try to get Americans to consume fewer calories and to prefer, low calorie drinks, and they launch a campaign? Like, is there that kind of thing, or is it more organic, somehow emerging from, unclear, like how do these shifts in consumer preference emerge?
Well, I think there are multiple things that are going on in my mind. And this is, speaking personally, that we see there's, pushes like back during the Obama administration. Michelle Obama's Let's Move program was encouraging kids to eat better and also to be more physically active. And there was quite a fair amount of success of the Let's Move campaign. Industry made a pledge at the time through the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation to cut calories. And it made, over a 5-year commitment, it met the calorie reduction commitment within 3 years. And so that was very successful in creating new products with lower or no calories. So that's one facet.
Wait, can you actually clarify that a little bit? Because that sounds like progress, and detecting evidence of progress in a short time frame today gives us hope about what we may expect in the future. So companies made a commitment to cut calories of what? Like if they make potato chips, they're like, we will come out with a low calorie potato chip? And they did?
If technologically possible, to come out with a lower calorie version. A lot of work, as I've mentioned, done in the beverage sector, that we've gone from very few. I mean, I think you're drinking a seltzer water that
Yes,
has no calories and no sugar, probably.
Well, the funny thing is, I found that the stuff that has 0 calories, I generally taste kind of artificial if they're trying to make it more pleasant. But when they have a few calories, it's a lot easier to get to a pleasant sweet taste. And I noticed that, right? Like you've got Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi with 0, and then you've got the other hybrids that have low calories, but they're a lot closer to the original flavor. So it seems like not trying to get to 0, but just trying to reduce has led to some success.
And actually, even there's been a recent, using your Coca-Cola example, there's been a recent formulation change in Coca-Cola Zero Sugar that's still 0 calorie, but my hat's off to the company that they did a fantastic job in making it taste more like classic Coca-Cola.
Yeah, Coke Zero, I think, right?
Yeah, it's now Coca-Cola Zero Sugar.
Yeah.
But the newest formulation tweak, I think, tastes absolutely fantastic. There's some things with small amounts of juice concentrate that deliver like what you're consuming, have 5-10 calories per can versus 0. Sometimes those do deliver a better taste profile. And there's a huge amount of the dedicated work of scientists looking at having the best flavor systems that are coming from natural, as well, extracts and those types of things that can really deliver a delicious taste. There's been a big proliferation over the years of flavored seltzer waters with 0 calories, and lots of them taste absolutely outstanding.
So what were the industry commitments then?
In the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation, the industry commitment was to cut calories, and I'm blanking on the numbers, but it was like a trillion and a half calories over the course.
Like from actual, like, here's the amount of product we sell per year and the cumulative calories of it, and we will shift purchasing decisions of customers to where they will purchase fewer calories.
Shifting purchasing decisions, shifting options, and making lower calorie or 0 calorie options, particularly in the beverage space, more of the norm for consumers to.
But were these cases where the companies could say, "Hey, look, I made a 0 calorie, version of this," and therefore say, "I did what I said I was going to do," but where nobody's actually buying it, and so functionally they really haven't done anything?
Well, it was in the case of the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation, it was all pegged to sales data, and so it did have to. You couldn't just create something that was a flop and call yourself successful.
Okay, so that sounds like honest improvement,
right? And the whole evaluation of the industry's commitment was done by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, so it was entirely independent and of high rigor to ensure that the data that were being provided did show real success.
So we're seeing like a real reduction in carbon emissions here, like a commitment to lowering and actually lowering.
And
how did that happen? I mean, to have that kind of an impact achieve that result in 3 years suggests either that consumers already would have liked to buy lower calorie, lower sugar things, but they didn't exist and the companies finally came through and made it, or it suggests that somehow that commitment was paralleled by a shift in consumer preference that allowed companies to sell products that previously weren't selling. Which one of those was it?
I actually think it's both. There have been, downward trends in shifts to lower caloric, particularly again on the beverage side. Also ways of doing things with even like ice cream, whipping more air into it. That that you are eating less actually, using different types of sweeteners or changing the fat profile and those types of things. But so it wasn't just exclusively driven by the beverage side, but we've seen some of these changes happening over time. Plus, there was a lot of innovation and new introduction for consumers during the span of the project.
Okay, so I'm used to people saying like, we want to cure cancer, and despite their best efforts in pouring tons of money into it, it's slow. So if the White House were to declare, cancer moonshot project, it's like, that's nice to declare, you're not really going to speed it up, but here it's like they declared a goal of a dramatic calorie reduction, industry committed to it, and in 3 years achieved it. So, it sounds like the ideas were there and just hadn't been acted on. Were there people within these companies that are like, I could make a lower calorie ice cream if you'll just let me? And had they been put off for a while, and then suddenly during this 3-year window, they were given the funds and permission to create the food product that they've been pitching for a long time?
I think that there was a fair amount of technology and innovation that was allowed to move forward or expanded from where it had been previously, certainly.
And does it continue now? Do you see from that achievement a sense that the industry is committed to ongoing innovation and keep driving down those calories, or was it more of a one-time surge?
No, I think that things have been maintained over time. When you look at the marketplace, you still see new and innovative products and even further shifts that stay in the marketplace. I think like we've talked about the sort of explosion of flavored seltzer water types of products. There's been a huge change in that.
Yeah.
And I think then that's when I go to the grocery store, I see more shelf space, more of the real estate in the grocery store occupied by those types of innovative products.
So what are examples of problems that the food and beverage industry is working on now that, were they to crack it, we would suddenly see, a Cambrian explosion of new species of foods, emerging that are made possible because of that innovation?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, the quest for the perfect alternative to cane sugar, beet sugar, sucrose, etc. Also looking at shifts that help the environment. We're seeing a huge amount of small startup companies and such that are developing plant-forward or plant-based products in hopes to change the amount of reliance on animal products and those types of things. And so
alternative meats.
We've got alternative meats. There's a biotech startup company called Perfect Day that has actually can make casein and whey without using the cow at all. And now on the food allergy side, it's still casein and whey and still contains the allergenic proteins, but it can be used in either a vegetarian or vegan type of frozen dessert.
So what would drive the complete displacement of dairy with that and within these nonprofits or organizations where all the stakeholders come together, what's the reaction of the dairy industry, to the advent of that?
Well, what I just described is a very novel. It's basically an ingredient solution rather than I'm not aware of anyone that is out there being able to replicate fluid milk without the cap, so to speak. So I don't, this is to, using things that are important in food production that can make delicious products and functional products without doing it. I don't think there'll ever be necessarily a true knockoff cow's milk, let's say. We've got lots of...
Yeah, that sounds like a challenge.
It could be a challenge.
There are companies out there that are now making artificial diamonds, right? There are some companies that have deconvoluted, the composition of like fine whiskeys and wines, and attempted to reconstitute them from the individual molecules that make them up. So if someone were to come up with an artificial milk, would it be greeted kind of like a GMO food or something like that, and said this isn't the real thing? Or would the majors say, we've been waiting for this, this will be so great for the planet, let's promote the heck out of it, as something that's going to dramatically reduce the number of cows that we have to sustain on this planet?
I don't have a perfect or a complete answer for that, because I don't know how possible it could actually be. But I mean, and whether it's you've alluded to as a real or artificial, or GMO versus not, a lot of these things are you harnessing the promise and the tools of modern biotechnology to be able to make something like the casein and whey example through fermentation and using a biotech derived organism that helps create these in the fermentation process. I think we're seeing a lot of novel technologies being developed and utilized. But as far as a complete replacement for the cow, I'm not sure that's...
I mean, look, we're trying to engineer pigs to be able to have organs that we can transplant from pigs into humans. So kind of makes me feel like if we're tackling those problems, if the biotech industry understood that there was going to be a real pull for an artificial, reconstituted milk product, it's in the cards. I don't know.
I would,
milk versus a pig liver that can survive in a human, comparable challenge.
Absolutely comparable. The dairy industry probably wouldn't be very happy with something like that.
No, it wouldn't. So that would be one reason why, whereas there's like nobody that would defend the human organ transplant industry. Like there's no one that's making a killing off of human organs, at least not legitimately, that would fight against the advent of what are called xeno transplanted organs, so from pigs. So the biotech industry doesn't have a lot of experience with these other sectors and all of their strange sociological sort of legacy issues. But it is intimidating to think that you might create a product that you think consumers would want, only to discover that you're fighting against a powerful lobby that will make consumers fear your product.
Yeah, there could be that facet of it. On maybe conversely, it's have the right set of questions been asked in different to get to different answers. Like organs in pigs that could be utilized in human transplantation. As are people thinking about the same types of questions, and maybe looking at it slightly differently. Is there are there ways that you could maybe have both in parallel?
Well, we're going to get
and
the
to
big
provide
audience.
options for consumers. I think it's highly lamentable that the biotech industry, certainly on the food side of the equation, has been, there's been so much negativity, given that I see high, huge promise. And we have, different ingredients that can be developed through a biotech solution that may reduce less reliance on acreage to grow a crop that is having something extracted, to help with the carbon footprint of industry and society around this planet. So I think there's a lot of things. One example is that here we've got this plant-based meat in the Impossible Burger, but yet what gives it what was developed to be the red color to make it look and have that visual appeal of red meat is a biotech derived heme ingredient that helps give it the red color. And so it's a balancing act, and I really lament the fact that biotechnology in food and agriculture has gotten such a bad rap.
Yeah, and it's an area that we've mapped out and studied to try to understand, like, when might that change. And there are some nuances in the way that people perceive what is a genetically modified organism, GMO. And if you leave behind some non-plant or just otherwise non-native genetic material in a plant, you'd say, oh, you've genetically modified it. But if you delete what's there, that there's a belief at the moment that that's not going to be considered GMO. And so with the advent of CRISPR and various gene editing technologies, there's been a resurgence in interest to try to improve plants by knocking stuff out, right? And in the old days, you would just like sift through various seeds and stuff like that and look for what's been randomly knocked out, solar radiation, gamma radiation will cause random mutations naturally and knock out some genes. And you could increase the odds of that with using chemicals to mutate the plant genome. And all those were considered to be sort of natural ways of knocking stuff out. Here, scientists can go in and just selectively knock out one thing at a time, right? There's, I believe, an effort to remove gluten from wheat. Can you make a wheat that just doesn't have that peptide sequence that triggers celiac, right? And if you just delete, is it a GMO? And everything hangs in balance. If somebody's like, dude, that spent so much time in the laboratory, I'm just going to call it GMO because it's freakish, then it gets a bad label. But if somebody's like, well, you didn't technically leave any foreign genetic material behind, so I will, not brand you GMO, well, then it's free sailing.
Yeah, I think there's huge promise with CRISPR technology and gene editing. And I think that perhaps maybe that is part of the turning corner for food and agricultural biotechnology, where you could approve something. Now, to your question of could you make gluten-free wheat, I don't know, because sometimes when you knock genes out, it ceases to be what it was to begin with, and may not have the same function. And since gluten is what makes the stretchiness and everything in the physical structure of breads and other types of cereal preparations, not a cereal chemist, but
yeah,
it's a tall order, and I don't know that it would possibly work.
It's a really interesting point. And we'll see. I think the people that are working on this have their reasons for thinking that they're really just changing it. Like, does gluten need to have these immunoreactive peptide sequences to be gluten? And the answer is probably no. It would be a
Quite-
different kind of gluten, though.
Yeah, quite
and-
possibly it may be no. And, could you still have some level of functionality by removing the gliadins that are the peptides that are critical in
Exactly.
celiac disease?
To me, those people are the equivalent of the ones that are working on the like pig livers that can be transplanted into humans, right? Like how much of something can you change and have it still be, the same?
Yeah, I mean, there'd been efforts to try to think about, could you eliminate the peptides in that are allergenic in peanuts and come up with a new breed of peanut that could be, quote, hypoallergenic.
What do you think? What have you seen there?
I think that, again, like with maybe converse to weed, I think it ends up ceasing being a peanut by the time you knock it out. And then, in different parts of the world, there are different peptides that cause the preponderance of peanut allergy, and scientific literature and those that are working in that space or have, discovered new peptides that are important over time, so that, how many and how much would you have to get rid of?
I found that really demoralizing when I first learned about it. At first it was like, oh, there's a problematic protein. And it's like, oh, humans have tens of thousands of proteins. You might be able to get away with getting rid of one protein in the peanut, we'll be fine. And then it's just like, oh no, actually we're allergic to these other ones and these other ones and these other ones. And you're like, man, like you could modify the most common proteins responsible, but you will always have this residual tail. So you might be able to turn this highly, frequent peanut allergy, which is, I think, maybe the most common allergy, food allergy there is, or one of the most common, into something rare, like sesame allergy. But you can't just cure us of the fear of allergies. You can merely reduce the incidence, right, with this. And so is it going to be worth it, to try to solve it that way, given that all products that have peanuts will have to continue to be labeled as having, peanuts?
I think that that's going to be the case for several more generations. Now, I know this is near and dear to your heart as well as mine in many ways, but if early introduction in infancy, starting at 4 to 6 months up through a year, if that can be successful in reducing the development of food allergies, as has been largely successful with peanut, with the LEAP study. Yeah. And if doing that with multiple food allergens can be successful, I might not be alive when it happens, but we could, in a couple of generations, actually have no incidence of, or very much of exquisitely lower incidence of food allergy by having, if we can prove that this works with young kids.
Sure. Essentially vaccinate people against, the emergence of food allergies. What's interesting, I don't know if ironic is the right term for it, but if the food industry were to engineer a peanut, to have fewer of these allergen proteins in it, and would render peanut allergies less frequent, it would be a lot harder to do the clinical studies to demonstrate that early introduction of peanuts can reduce the incidence of peanut allergy, right? Just because it would take a larger study. So,
well, and if it's not there to begin with, does it risk development of other food allergies or something, or other issues in early childhood development? We don't know the answer to that.
Okay, but I guess what I mean is, if there's a path dependency, the order in which we as a society solve these problems and in which tool we bring to bear, it is possible to do these clinical studies with relatively common food allergens, right? Food allergies. It only requires a few thousand patients, to be enrolled and to be randomized to early introduction of, tree nuts and peanuts. As you get to less common, food allergies like sesame, strawberries, it would take a much, much larger study. It's a lot harder to demonstrate that, early introduction can reduce it. And so if we develop this regimen, though, then we will reduce the incidence of food allergies, and it will reduce the food industry's rationale for trying to engineer these foods and make them less likely to cause allergies in the first place. If we didn't have early introduction, and we continue to see this high emergence of food allergies, then you would have a rationale for the food industry to come at this problem. So I would argue that when both sides, it's like only one of us is really going to succeed, recognizing when one is starting to have, succeed reduces interest in the pursuit of other approaches, right? So I wonder if there's a role for FAIR, to actually bring together the groups that are working on these problems from radically different standpoints in order to, try to make sure that we preserve some balance in the pursuit of these, rather than have each group say, I don't know, I'm hesitant to go forward because the other guys might succeed and reduce the market for me.
I think there is high value in doing that. And it's not necessarily just related to decreasing allergenicity of a food commodity and or proving that prevention works. But I think the other thing is that, the work that FAIR is doing to wanting to begin collecting all of the oral food challenge data to be able to develop thresholds where there could be, essentially a bit of a safe harbor for industry, less need for industry to push people away from their food products with the breadth of the precautionary allergen labeling statements that we see out there that may or may not even, some products have all top 8 at present on the statement. And I could probably guarantee that many of those plants don't have all top 8 allergens in them. And they wouldn't have to do it. But, and thinking about, if there was a way that, that you're not going to have a life-threatening reaction, also that can build more trust and unlock more sales of food products to a broader community if the industry has the ability to still be truthful and follow all the requirements related to the upcoming top 9 with the addition of sesame, but provide more clear, consistent information to consumers, they can sell more products.
So I suppose to the extent that one can win the food industry over to recognizing that there's this group of holdouts, food hesitant individuals, allergen, the allergen worried. I don't know what the term should be, but to say, if you come out with a line of foods that, is labeled, to convey safety, that market is yours, right?
I think that's a huge sector of the marketplace that can be captured over time.
And is the food industry recognizing that there's an opportunity to do that? Like the equivalent of bakeries that are, promoting themselves as allergy aware, and we make, we're free of all these different allergens, or at the very least label precisely which ones have what, and guarantee you that they weren't made in, a shared oven or something like that. Do you see that at a larger scale where companies are saying, hey, let's, start catering to this allergy sensitive or aware community?
I do see that happening, both with large companies wanting to be clear, precise and transparent, as well as a lot of new companies that are driving toward more niche types of products that where they set themselves up to be allergy friendly or to not have a variety of food allergens in the plant to begin with. You know, I think there is great opportunity to be had.
Well, certainly if we're going to be successful with the seed study that FAIR is sponsoring, we're really trying to, by doing a clinical study that shows that early introduction can reduce the emergence of food allergies in kids, I guess what we're trying to offer up research that all companies can cite, because no one company seems interested in running the study itself, because it will be spending its money on an expensive trial only to have everybody else be able to, you know, horn in on that market. But we're doing that study, and if we show it, then they will all be able to now make that medical claim, hopefully, saying our foods will reduce the emergence of food allergies.
Absolutely.
So my hope would be that they will start to innovate and compete with one another for who can create the most convenient form factor for getting 8 or 9 different food allergens into a 4-month-old baby.
Right.
Like, that's the challenge. Like, is it going to be different, applesauce packets or, powders or whatever it is? That's the kind of innovation that the food companies seem to be good at, not so much clinical trials, I guess.
No, they're very innovative. Then one of the big questions is, does it deliver what it needs to deliver to actually prove it? Because a study looked at some of these commercial products that are in the marketplace now and found that some had, very low levels of, let's say, peanut protein in it, and so there wouldn't be much benefit.
Yeah.
Or it could be enough potentially. Would it make food allergy cause more food allergy possibly? So that's a reason to have really strong science as part of the seed study on knowing what all the levels are of protein and given it what intervals and what frequency, to have that be the underpinning of what government advice is that we have now, but with a strong study that shows it beyond just peanut.
Yeah. Just last question. Given that you've been at so many different organizations with so many acronyms, which one do you think would be the one that would be the watchdog to ensure that all companies who claim that their food is providing an infant with enough of the desired allergen to prevent the emergence of allergies, in fact, have enough of that protein in their product? Because if they're underdosing, it's like giving a person with an infection some fake knockoff antibiotic pill that barely has any antibiotic in it. It's dangerous.
Exactly. That perfect analogy, Peter. That I think it's going to be the FDA, not necessarily an external organization. Could there be interest in, one of the allergy organization of, not the patient advocacy organization, but the professional, of physicians and clinicians? There could be some level there, but it's similar. Let's say that down the road we're going to have early health claim that early introduction of the top 9 food allergens in the diets of infants from beginning at 4 months through a year, prevents and reduces the risk of developing food allergy. That underpinning that's in the health claim territory at FDA, and there are health claims that actually have amounts in the language of the claim. Some of the qualified health claims related to consumption of nuts and heart disease. That you have to eat X amount. and or in the body of the monograph that supports it for the claim to be allowed to be used would state that you need to have X grams delivered over a certain period of time and those types of things. And that would be where FDA would have the ability for very strong enforcement.
So if somebody tried to market pecan pie as, good for your heart, would the FDA call them out on that?
Well, they probably most assuredly would, because another piece underpinning health claims on foods in the United States, in the FDA regulations, is that you can't be excessive in saturated fat, sodium, and possible, and deliver other nutrients. So it probably wouldn't be on pecan pie.
All
and
right.
then there's certain things that just don't pass the laugh test.
Well, it's good to know that there's a laugh test. So that's the most practical test of all, I think, sometimes. Bob, thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely be chatting some more. It's clear that there's, a whole universe of innovation going on in the food and beverage industry.
Absolutely.
And, it's got tremendous implications for our health and, frankly, quality of life. So it's definitely something we should explore some more.
Agreed. Thank you very much, Peter.
All
Really
right.
enjoyed it.
Well, take care.
All right.